Every- uh, are you able to hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Today, the topic for the what I'm going to explain is about the respiratory failure. I'm Dr. Rakesh, assistant professor from Department of Pulmonology. Before going to a definition of the respiratory failure, are you able to hear me? Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
right.
Yes, sir.
Before going to definition of respiratory failure, to maintain adequate oxygenation on normal arterial blood pH, normal cellular function, good mitochondrial energy production, okay, uh, and body homeostasis is very important. And for this, there is link between the respiratory system, circulation, and cellular metabolism. Okay, especially the link. In this link, the first one is involved is respiratory system. If there is any disturbance in this first link, that is the so-called respiratory system, so the normal functions like functions like gas exchange, okay, gas exchange function, ventilation, the steady state of gas exchange ventilation will be disturbed, leading to the condition called respiratory failure. Okay. So if you come to the definition of respiratory failure, it is not a disease, but a consequence of variety of disorders which interfere with the primary functions of the respiratory system, which are oxidation of the blood, removal of the carbon dioxide from the circulation. It is a condition in which one or both the gas exchange functions fail, resulting in either inadequate blood oxygenation, carbon dioxide removal, or both. As per blood gas analysis, respiratory failure is present when PaO2, partial pressure of oxygen in arterial blood, is less than 60 mmHg on room air. So types of respiratory, there are 4 types of respiratory failure: type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Type 1 is generally hypoxemic. It is said to be present when PaO2, partial pressure of oxygen in arterial blood, is less than 60 mmHg, and PaCO2, partial pressure of carbon dioxide in arterial blood, is not, it may be normal or it may become less than 40 mmHg. Normal PaCO2 is between 35 to 45, that is the range. 40 is the normal value. In hypoxemic respiratory failure, PaO2 will be decreased. PaO2 normal range generally is like 80 to 100 mmHg. So PaO2 will be decreased, it becomes less than 60. PCO2 may be normal or it may be less than 40 mmHg. But PCO2 is not increased in case of hypoxemic respiratory failure. This is the most common type of respiratory failure. It will occur in any condition which leads to filling of the alveoli with fluid or collapse of the respiratory units. So, in disease states like pneumonia, where the alveoli is filled with exudate, like in case of pulmonary hemorrhage, the alveoli are filled with blood. Okay, in case of pulmonary edema, where the transudate fluid is present, or collapse of the respiratory units, alveoli or bronchi because of the adjacent mass region or because of the fibrosis, any condition. In all these conditions, the most common type of respiratory failure is hypoxemic respiratory failure. What is the difference between hypoxemia, hypoxia? Decreased oxygen content at the tissue level is hypoxia. Decreased oxygen content in the blood, the term called as hypoxemia. Type 2, hypercapnic respiratory failure. This is present when carbon dioxide levels are more than or equal to 45 mmHg, but hypoxemia is common to both types. So hypoxemia is present in both type 1 and type 2, but there will be hypercapnia. PCO2 will increase greater than 45 mmHg in case of type 2 hypercapnic respiratory failure. Type 3, perioperative respiratory failure, is a subtype of type 1 respiratory failure. This is commonly noticed in perioperative period due to basal lung atelectasis. Okay. Type 4, shock-related respiratory failure. Like in cardiac disease states like congestive heart failure, there will be arrhythmias. So that may lead to the cardiogenic shock. There will be cardiogenic shock. In case of sepsis, septic shock, if there is decreased body fluid volume, there will be, it may go into hypovolemic shock. All these shock conditions, there will be hypoperfusion, decreased blood supply to the organ. So that leads to respiratory failure. This is termed as shock-related respiratory failure. So depending upon the duration, acute respiratory failure. This is a acute is generally life-threatening condition. Manifestations of chronic failure may go unnoticed for a considerable period of time. But acute respiratory failure is a onset is very like it develops over minutes to hours. This type of failure develops before the compensation can occur and pH is usually low. The change in normal arterial, what is the normal arterial bed pH? 7.35 to 7.45 is the range. 7.40 is the normal value. The change in pH in case of acute conditions will be 0.8. Whereas the change in pH in case of chronic conditions will be 0.3. Okay. Chronic respiratory failure. It develops over months to year and it is compensated to buffer if there is respiratory acidosis and improve oxygenation. Okay. So the respiratory acidosis will be buffered, lead to a chronic condition. Okay. And it improves oxygenation. So in case of chronic respiratory failure, pH of chronic respiratory failure may only be slightly decreased. So the change in pH will be only 0.3. Acute respiratory failure can be superimposed on chronic respiratory failure, as in acute exacerbation of COPD. So some basic concepts about, before going to pathophysiology, some basic concepts about physiology of oxygenation. Steps involved in oxidation. So what are the steps involved in oxidation? So from oxygen from external environment, it goes into the alveoli. From alveoli, it has to cross the respiratory membrane and it enters the bloodstream and from there into tissues. Okay. So CO2 from the tissues, from the peripheral tissues to the blood, from blood to blood enter into the, it passes the respiratory and reaches the alveoli. From alveoli, it is eliminated from the through connecting zone of the lung into the external environment. Like this, CO2 is eliminated. So these are the basic steps involved in oxidation. O2 dissociation curve. You all know O2 dissociation curve. O2 dissociation is a sigmoid shaped curve. It is plotted between PaO2 and oxyhemoglobin saturation, SpO2. So in this sigmoid O2 dissociation curve, the amount of oxygen that is bound to hemoglobin that depends upon the partial pressure of the oxygen in the arterial blood. So this graph shows the relation between the partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood and the oxyhemoglobin saturation. Oxyhemoglobin saturation, it depends upon the PaO2. Okay. Generally, so sigmoid shape of this oxygen dissociation curve, it will have steep portion, plateau phase, steep portion. So in this the graph, the curve is in steep portion, it indicates that the PaO2 is between like 10 to 50 mmHg. If the PaO2 crosses greater than 70 mmHg, generally it attains plateau phase. So once this plateau phase of the sigmoid O2 dissociation curve is attained, so how much FiO2, how much fraction of inhaled oxygen concentration will increase? There will be no significant increase in oxygen saturation. Okay. So there will be no significant increase in oxygen saturation more than once the oxygen dissociation curve has reached plateau phase, where the oxygen saturation will be greater than 80% or greater than 90%, and where the PaO2 will be greater than 70 mmHg. Okay, so PaO2 will be greater than 70 mmHg. The relationship between CO2 production and CO2 elimination. This relation is basically can be determined. So CO2 production, CO2 elimination, the steady state CO2 production should be equal to the CO2 elimination. If this steady state where CO2 production is not equal to CO2 elimination, then the CO2, then there will be disturbance to meet the metabolic needs of the body. So this relation can be determined by the equation VA equal to K into VCO2 by PaCO2. VA refers to alveolar ventilation, K for constant. VCO2 is a CO2 ventilation. PaCO2, partial pressure of the carbon dioxide in arterial blood. So alveolar ventilation is linearly from you see this equation. Alveolar ventilation is linearly related to carbon dioxide ventilation. So carbon dioxide ventilation and alveolar ventilation are linearly related. So if there is change in alveolar ventilation, there should be change in CO2 ventilation correspondingly. Efficiency of respiration by alveolar arterial O2 gradient. So alveolar arterial O2 gradient. Okay, this is very important. This equation is very important. PaO2 equals to FiO2 into Pb minus PH2O minus PaCO2 by R. P capital A O2, partial pressure of the oxygen in alveolus. FiO2, fraction of inhaled oxygen concentration. Pb, barometric pressure, normally around 760 mmHg. PH2O, water vapor pressure. PaCO2 by respiratory exchange ratio. In our all individuals, generally we take more of carbohydrate food, so it will be respiratory exchange ratio. It will be 0.8. It's a constant value R. In this formula, Pb, barometric pressure 760 mmHg. PH2O 37 mmHg or 47, in some books it is given as even 47 mmHg. These two values are constant. And FiO2 is normal. In room air, how much is the fraction of inhaled oxygen, present oxygen concentration? 21%. Okay. These values are all constant. Okay. So but we can increase this FiO2 by the external O2 source. By the external O2 source, we can increase this FiO2, but we cannot change this barometric pressure and PH2O. Okay. So if you want to, for example, if you want to increase in oxygen saturation in any patient, we have to increase FiO2 by the external O2 supply. Because this is the only option. We cannot increase barometric pressure, cannot increase water vapor pressure, and PaCO2, of course, it is constant. This constant is maintained by the body. So from this, you can calculate partial pressure of the oxygen in alveolus. If you subtract partial pressure of the oxygen in arterial bed from the partial pressure of oxygen in alveolus, we will get the alveolar arterial O2 gradient. So this implies this shows the efficiency, how much efficiency the respiration activity is going on. Factors that determine O2 delivery to tissues. So there will be two factors that determine O2 delivery to the peripheral level. One is the one factor is the cardiac output. Other factor is the amount of oxygen content present in the arterial bed, that is CaO2. Okay. DO2 refers to oxygen delivery. Oxygen delivery equals to cardiac output into amount of oxygen in the arterial blood into 10. This is the formula that gives you that helps in the calculation of oxygen delivery. Amount of oxygen in the arterial blood can be calculated from the formula hemoglobin multiplied by 1.34 into oxygen hemoglobin saturation. This whole thing should be added with PaO2 into 0.0031. This 0.031 is the solubility coefficient of oxygen solubility coefficient for oxygen hemoglobin saturation. Decrease in the oxygen hemoglobin saturation. Okay. So there should be adequate FiO2. the oxygen concentration here should be adequate so that the PaO2 levels in the body will be maintained, so that the oxyhemoglobin saturation will be maintained. So if there is decrease in FiO2 levels, that leads to decrease in SpO2 levels ultimately. This can be caused by accidental hypoxic gas administration, disconnect in mechanically ventilated patients. If you disconnect the breathing circuit, that will lead to again decreased FiO2 levels, low inspired air fraction, or increase in dead space. For example, in the increase in dead space. What is dead space? That do not participate in gas section. Normal dead space. What is the connecting zones of the lung? Trachea, major bronchi, lobar bronchi, that do not participate in gas section refers to dead space. So if there is increase in dead space and rebreathing of the exhaled air, all these conditions can cause decreased FiO2 levels, ultimately decreased SpO2. Alveolar hypoventilation. It must be severe to cause hypoxemia if there is no underlying respiratory disorder. As rise in PCO2 causes P capital A O2 to fall. So we already discussed in the previous equation. Okay. So formula, alveolar ventilation is linearly related to PCO2 levels. Okay. Similarly, P capital A O2, alveolar oxygen. So if there is increase in PCO2 levels, that will decrease the P capital A O2, partial pressure of the oxygen in the alveolus. Hypoxemia from hypoventilation may be corrected by increasing FiO2. So remaining all other parameters that are described in the previous formula that are constant, we cannot increase. We can only by increasing FiO2 levels we can correct hypoxemia. For example, in a person with normal, pristine, healthy lungs, okay, he's shot with some heroin injection, okay. So he goes into alveolar hypoventilation. So, but oxygen transfer mechanisms are intact. Even though the oxygen transfer mechanisms are intact, so there will be decrease in oxygen saturation. That is because the alveolar oxygen is placed only for 760 millimeters of atmospheric pressure. Okay. And the alveolar ventilation is really related to the CO2 ventilation. Doubling alveolar ventilation, it will halve your carbon dioxide levels. Doubling carbon dioxide levels, it will halve your alveolar ventilation. Low barometric pressure. If atmospheric pressure falls, for example, if you go to higher altitude regions, there will be decrease in oxyhemoglobin saturation. Why there will be decrease in oxyhemoglobin saturation? It is not because of the decreased FiO2 levels. It is because of the decreased barometric pressure. Okay. Diffusion impairment. Efficient gas exchange depends upon the interface between alveolar endothelium and bloodstream. That is a capillary epithelium. If this interface, that is a respiratory membrane, is involved in disease process, there will be impairment of diffusion. As CO2 is more soluble than O2, a diffusion deficit that causes hypoxemia will not cause hypercapnia. Examples of this diffusion impairment: cardiogenic pulmonary edema, ARDS, pulmonary fibrosis, all this leads to diffusion deficits. Ventilation perfusion mismatch. So ventilation perfusion, you all know perfusion, when you come from top to bottom of the lungs, perfusion increases because of the gravity. Similarly, ventilation also increases when you come from top to bottom of the lungs. Why? Assume so consider lungs as a viscous sac or a sac of honey. So where will be the high pressure? At the top portion or the lower portion? The pressure will be higher at the lower portion. Okay. Normally, the height of the lungs, generally, the height of the lungs can be considered as a 30 centimeter in height, 30 centimeter height. So, if you consider lungs are filled with fluid or water, the lung density is 1/4 to that of the water density. So 1/4 into 30, that gives 7.5. Okay. So at the bottom of the lungs will have a pressure about 30 centimeter. Okay, that is by the height of the lungs. Whereas the lungs are subjected to an outside pressure of 7.5 centimeter. The lungs are subject to an outside pressure of 7.5 centimeter. The pressure here refers to the pleural pressure. Okay. So the lung which is fully compliant, there is no space. There is no space in the alveoli to accept air, will be present in the upper portion of the lung. So now in this condition, if you take breath, there will be the air which comes from the top portion to the lower portion. As there is no space in the upper portion of the lungs, it will go into the the alveoli present at the lower portion of the lungs will be filled. So this shows the ventilation also increases as we come from top to bottom. Understanding? So ventilation perfusion mismatch, it may occur. So hypoxemia, in this condition, it leads to hypoxemia. Hypoxemia can occur when there is inequality in alveolar ventilation perfusion. It is important because of hypoxemia in critically ill patients. It may occur in several conditions like atelectasis, pulmonary embolism, patient's position, endotracheal intubation. This condition improves with increasing FiO2. In case of atelectasis, positive end expiratory pressure is required to raise arterial oxygen. If the lung is collapsed, if there is atelectasis in the lung, there is a collapse. So simply by increasing FiO2 levels, oxygen concentration, SpO2 will not increase. The thing we have to do is we have to increase positive end expiratory pressure or CPAP. These things we have to increase the oxygen concentration, not the FiO2. In case where there is significant ventilation perfusion mismatch that is going into the shunt. Okay. This PEEP it will increase the functional residual capacity. So I will tell you one more example where there will be no ventilation, no perfusion. Can you tell me for example, a student sitting in the library is reading for many hours. So he throw a peanut up. He tries to catch the peanut. The peanut goes directly into the airway. It is blocked the right main airway. Simultaneously at the same time, it will go and block the left pulmonary blood vessel. The blood goes and it will go and clot the pulmonary blood vessel. Okay. The blood clot will happen at the left pulmonary blood vessel. So there will be blood clot and there will be no airway because of the obstruction in the right main bronchus because of the peanut. Both, so there will be no ventilation, no perfusion. Okay, this is the one classical example. So abnormal shunting. So shunting, what do you mean by shunt? So suppose so for example, in case of like severe pneumonia, the alveoli is filled with exudate. So the blood which is going to the diseased alveoli, it will not be perfused. It will not be perfused with oxygen. So it will be shunted to the other alveoli where it can be perfused with the oxygen. So what happens here? There will be admixture of the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. So the admixture of the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood that leads to decreased oxyhemoglobin SpO2. That leads to decreased oxyhemoglobin saturation. So in this condition, how much FiO2 you increase, the oxygen concentration, the SpO2 will not increase. See, only the dissolved oxygen content may increase to maximum by about 2%. This increase in dissolved oxygen content by 2% by increasing FiO2 levels. So it will not lead to significant increase in oxygen content. Thereby it will not lead to significant increase in oxyhemoglobin saturation. If there is significant shunt, like in conditions like pulmonary edema, ARDS, severe pneumonia. Okay. So about 2% of the cardiac output shunt is physiological and it occurs in normal individuals. So this shunting can occur in cyanotic heart disease, pulmonary arteriovenous malformation. So other lung conditions that can cause ventilation perfusion mismatch. So will cause a shunt if they are severe. Okay. Shunted blood is never exposed to alveolar gases. Hence the resultant hypoxemia is not corrected with oxygen, though alveolar collapse can be decreased with PEEP. So definitely we have to from the external source, we have to provide external oxygen supply. But before supplying external oxygen supply, we have to provide PEEP or CPAP to increase functional residual capacity. So to increase functional residual capacity, we have to provide external PEEP or CPAP. Simply by increasing FiO2 levels will not improve oxygen saturation in case of shunt. This functional residual capacity, we have to increase this functional residual capacity by PEEP in a such a way above the lung volume at which it closes. I mean, at which the closing capacity happens. Okay. So type 2 hypercapnic respiratory failure. Patients with this type are unable to eliminate carbon dioxide and PCO2 will raise in inverse proportion to ventilation. So again, in this type 2 respiratory failure, various mechanisms, abnormalities of respiratory drive, reduced central respiratory drive decreases minute ventilation, severe hypercapnia or hypoxemia will depress the respiratory drive further, leading to vicious cycle deterioration. The factors that tend to depress the respiratory center may also decrease cerebral function also. Abnormalities of spinal cord, injury to the spinal cord affects diaphragmatic function, that causing hypoventilation. Abnormalities of nerves can lead to decreased vital capacity and increased respiratory rate as in Guillain-Barré syndrome. If the severity of situation is not appreciated, patient may develop respiratory acidosis and arrest. Abnormalities of muscles, as in congenital myopathies, it leads to ventilator failure. Abnormalities of chest wall, it impairs the mechanisms of ventilation and precipitates respiratory failure. So I will quote all these examples for these abnormalities in the coming slides. Abnormalities of airways like COPD, asthma, okay. Lungs, COPD causes type 2 respiratory as the patient gets exhausted and setting up acute exacerbation. Increase in dead space due to hyperinflation reduces effective minute ventilation. In the absence of acute insult, the resulting hypercapnia is compensated. Increased CO2 production. An increase in workout breathing or excessive carbohydrate intake will increase PaCO2 and exacerbate type 2 respiratory failure. So, causes of type 1 respiratory failure, acute conditions, acute pulmonary edema, pneumonia, acute lung injury, ARDS, pneumothorax, acute severe asthma, pulmonary embolism. So, type 1 respiratory failure, chronic conditions, ILD, interstitial lung disease, pulmonary fibrosis, chronic pulmonary thromboembolism, pulmonary arterial hypertension, chronic heart failure, chest wall disorders like kyphoscoliosis or scoliosis, cyanotic. Even many chest wall disorders are there, pectus cavernatum, pectus escarentum, okay. Cyanotic congenital heart diseases, pulmonary arterial venous malformation. Coming to type 2 respiratory failure, acute examples, acute exacerbation of COPD, acute and chronic COPD, Guillain-Barré syndrome, myasthenia gravis, okay. Sedatives, drug overdose, poisoning, hepatic renal failure, head injury, raised intracranial pressure. Chronic conditions, type 2 respiratory, COPD, obesity, hypoventilations, motor neuron diseases, with significant hemiplegia, neuromuscular disorders, chest wall disorders like kyphoscoliosis, ruptured diaphragm, all these are chronic examples in type 2 respiratory failure. So type 3, that is the perioperative respiratory failure. In this perioperative respiratory failure, common respiratory failure is a normal type 1 respiratory failure only in perioperative respiratory failure. Examples for type 3 respiratory, that is perioperative respiratory failure, inadequate postoperative analgesia, upper abdominal incision, obesity, ascites, preoperative tobacco smoking, excessive airway secretions, all these factors, especially in a patient who is in perioperative period, can predispose to type 1 respiratory failure. So this shock I told you previously, cardiac shock, septic shock, hypotensive shock, all these shock conditions can lead to respiratory failure. Clinical presentation, clinical manifestation in a patient with respiratory failure are due to hypoxia or underlying disorder. Hypoxia leads to hyperventilation, tachypnea and dyspnea due to stimulation of carotid body receptors. Cyanosis may occur depending upon the hemoglobin concentration and perfusion of the patient. Hypoxia may further lead to altered mentation, coma, seizures, eventually permanent brain damage. Stimulation of sympathetic nervous system by hypoxemia can lead to tachycardia, diaphoresis, and cold extremities due to systemic vasoconstriction. Finally, severe hypoxia can cause bradycardia, vasodilatation, hypotension, myocardial ischemia, myocardial infarction, arrhythmias, even cardiac arrest also. So patient may have myoclonus seizures. Hypercapnia, if you come to hypercapnia, so patients may present with acidotic breathing, lethargy, somnolence, coma, asterexis, restlessness, altered speech, headache, papilloedema. Clinical presentation of this hypercapnic patient also depends upon the underlying disorder, like past history of cardiac diseases in the patient with cardiogenic pulmonary edema, history of fever, cough with expectoration, in patient with pneumonia. So even severe pneumonia can lead to type 2 respiratory failure. So how will you approach a patient with respiratory failure? Clinical signs and symptoms are non-specific, but are important to initial suspicion of respiratory failure. It is more important to recognize the underlying disease process, because once you recognize the underlying disease process and try to correct this underlying disease process, that helps in the improvement of the respiratory failure also. Patient needs a careful history. So careful history is very important to look for the underlying comorbidities like COPD, asthma, any other comorbidities, history of cardiac diseases, other systemic diseases. So careful history is also very important to treat the underlying disorder that helps in the improvement of the respiratory failure. So blood gas analysis is also important for the diagnosis of respiratory failure, whether he is in type 1 or type 2 respiratory failure, whether it is acute respiratory failure, or whether it is chronic respiratory failure, whether it is compensated, not compensated. It is also important to know the type of respiratory failure and underlying disorder for adequate management. Okay. For example, if the so once you know whether it is a type 1 or type 2 respiratory failure, accordingly you can manage the patient with the help of oxygen support or with the help of PEEP support. Okay. Based on the type 1 respiratory failure, based on the severity of the condition. Patients with type 1 respiratory failure are hypoxic, hypocarbic, tachypneic. In contrast, patients with type 2 respiratory failure are hypercarbic, hypoxic, acidotic with low respiratory rate. Evaluation of the underlying cause should be started along with the basic initial investigations. Okay. So all the basic initial investigations, basic like CPP-RFT, LFT will send. But before sending CPP, LFT, RFT, the first the suspect the patient is in respiratory failure. So we have to look into his workout breathing. How is his workout breathing? So workout breathing is equals to pressure into volume. The pressure of the lung is determined by the elastic and resistance forces. Okay, that's multiplied with the tidal volume of the lung. Okay, we have to send ABG, arterial blood gas analysis, to look into how is his CO2 levels, how is his bicarbonate levels, how is his oxidation status. Pulse oximetry, it will give you oxyhemoglobin saturation. PFT, pulmonary, of course, PFT we should not do in acute in respiratory. We should, after the patient becomes stable only, we should do respiratory failure. So unless the patient becomes stable and not start stable, we should not do PFT. Okay. ESG, electrocardiogram. So we should look into the ECG. We should look into any ischemic changes present, any arrhythmias present. Okay. 4D echogram. Further, to look into it, any regional wall motion abdominal present, how is the LV function, how is the RV function in detail. Chest X-ray, is there any mass region, is there any consolidation, is there any fibrosis, is there any pleural effusion, pneumothorax, all these factors we have to look into the chest X-ray. So we have to look into the underlying disorder by this, all these various investigations. Treatment, oxygen supplementation. The management of respiratory failure includes these essential components. Aim of the treatment is to primarily manage hypoxemia effectively. So we have to manage hypoxemia effectively. All patients with respiratory failure should be managed in an intensive care setting, usually as most patients are critically ill and may require ventilatory support. Underlying conditions should be sought thoroughly and managed on priority. Ventilatory management, both invasive and non-invasive, should be used as support to manage till underlying disorders are treated. So, oxygen supplementation. If the patient is in mild respiratory failure, so only mild hypoxemia is present, we can manage patient with the help of oxygen with simply O2 mask or nasal prongs. For example, nasal prongs can provide up to 1 to 6 liters of oxygen. Hudson face mask can provide up to 6 to 8 liters. If you want 15 liters of oxygen, you can use non-rebreathing face mask. And there is one more special mask like in COPD patient, like Venturi mask, that gives fixed amount of oxygen concentration. So, but even with the help of all these measures, also still the patient is tachypneic, and his workout breathing is increasing. He's not becoming stable, then you should think of use of non-invasive ventilation. Okay, so non-invasive ventilation, with the help of non-invasive ventilation, it helps to decrease the workout breathing. Generally, non-invasive ventilation, CPAP and BiPAP 2 will be there. So, okay, BiPAP is expiratory positive airway pressure, inspiratory positive airway, both pressures will be there in BiPAP. CPAP is only expiratory positive airway pressure will be there. So if there is, especially if there is increased CO2 levels, we have to use BiPAP. But with the patient, even though you use BiPAP machine, that is the NAV BiPAP, and the patient is deteriorating, patient BP is falling, you are seeing arrhythmias in the patient, he is becoming hemodynamically unstable. So you should not prolong NAV. Immediately we should switch to the invasive ventilation. We have to intubate the patient and keep the in the ventilatory support. Okay. So in this invasive ventilatory support, before we should do pre-oxygenation. We should do pre-oxygenation with the ambu bag. This pre-oxygenation with the ambu bag, it will help to improve hypoxemia. It will help to improve hypoxemia. It will increase the oxyhemoglobin saturation to a certain extent, so that after you ventilate the patient, you can provide PEEP. That PEEP helps to increase the FRC levels greater than greater than the lung volume at which it closes, thereby improving the oxygen hemoglobin saturation. So after you provide PEEP support, then only increase FiO2 later. If the disease process is significant, okay. So like this, we have to manage appropriately depending upon the severity of the patient. Like, this should be the usage of O2 support, like with nasal prongs or with O2 face mask or with NIV support or with invasive ventilation. Thank you. Hello, all of you, are you there? Hello, all of you, are you there? Hello.
Yes, sir.
If you have anybody any doubts, you can please. I'm ready to clarify. You can ask me any doubts if you have. Anybody having any doubts? Hello. Any disturbance is there? Any disturbance in line?